thank you to my colleagues for joining us this morning, and most especially to Senator Blackburn, who has been a tremendous ally in this work and a partner. We have worked in a very collegial way on a number of hearings so far, including this one on hidden holiday hazards. And we have really an extraordinarily distinguished and able panel joining us this morning, beginning with Trista Hamsmith, who will tell us her personal story of tragedy that she has turned into a positive. And I really want to thank you, Trista, for being here today in the memory of your daughter, Reese. And as we will announce today, Senator Blackburn and I, we are introducing a bill that, in fact, will seek to protect against exactly the kind of tragedy that you experienced. And I want to welcome you, and I understand your mom is here as well. Thank you for joining us today. This issue is an extraordinarily serious one, and I want to thank the United States Public Interest Research Group for the constant work that you have done over so many years. I have worked in cooperation with the Connecticut PIRG now for probably 25 years or more, every year to publicize the dangers that come from toys. And the report that you do every year, Trouble in Toyland, is really a model of public service and public education. And yet, year after year, we find again and again that these tragedies are repeated, unfortunately, and so grievously for the families affected. The holidays ought to be a time of really unsurpassed joy and celebration, but all too often they culminate in trips to emergency rooms because of dangers that result from toys and decor that is involved in the holidays. And we all, if we think about it, have some experience with these kinds of mishaps, accidents, whatever they may be called. They are principally the result of either carelessness or bad manufacturing or lack of standards in those toys that children use. And they are joyful about receiving them until those tragedies result. We're going to talk today about some of the most common culprits. If we were to rename this hearing, it might be called Swallowing Bad Stuff. Swallowing bad stuff that results in choking or digestive failure or poisoning. What we know is that the repeated culprits are magnets, button cell batteries, small parts in ordinary toys, balloons, and we're going to go through them in this hearing. But I have examples. For example, the button cell batteries that are found in these kinds of lights come out easily, can be swallowed. They are very small by an 18-month-old child, as happened in your case, Trista, with Reese, or by pets or older people. These button cell batteries are a menace, and every year, literally every year, thousands cause emergency room visits. In 2020 alone, there were 3,500 reported button battery ingestions. That number is likely an undercount. The estimate is that only about 11% of these kinds of ingestions are actually reported. In Connecticut, since 2016, there have been 70 reported battery ingestions. 24 of them resulted in hospital admissions. And very alarmingly, button batteries have become more common, and between March and September of 2020 alone, March and September of 2020, there were an increase of 93% in injuries among children resulting from them. We're going to explore a little bit about what the reasons might have been. Perhaps they were, in fact, the fact that the pandemic caused people to be at home with toys. They were used more often. We can speculate, but the main point is these kinds of injuries are preventable, and that's the reason that we have introduced, Senator Blackburn and I are introducing Reese's Law in honor of Reese Hamsmith and her loss of life, I think, is going to inspire us to do more and do it better. The other major culprit, magnets, which obviously can be pulled apart, can be swallowed. They're small, easily ingested, but they have a magnetic force that can pull together different sections of the digestive tract, blocking, perforating, damaging intestines, stomachs, especially in the smallest of children. And each of these little magnets can be pulled apart, can be found on the floor, can be ingested, and they have resulted also in thousands over the last 10 years of injuries and trips to the emergency room. In total, here's the statistic that I hope folks will remember. 150,000 toy-related injuries were reported in 2020 alone, and 9 deaths. 150,000 injuries resulting from toys like the ones that I have shown, and 9 deaths. And some of them result from counterfeiting, where lesser materials or poor workmanship were involved. Counterfeiters can, with relative ease, sell knockoff toys or other goods at a cheap price to unwitting holiday shoppers. Counterfeit toys may be dangerous because of their use of cheap materials and lack of compliance with product safety standards, but they also may fail to display accurate warning labels, which could mislead or confuse consumers. And I want to mention, in the category of choking, balloons, which are, once again, very innocent looking, and in fact are wonderful playthings as long as they remain inflated. If they are broken, the bits and pieces or uninflated balloons can be swallowed by children. And again, one of the most common causes of choking and asphyxiation are balloons, which are left on the floor where small children crawling around or running around can ingest them. And holiday decor, Christmas trees, this kind of automatic light for the Christmas tree. You press this if it's linked to a plug, can overheat, or the tree itself can ignite if candles are used. Different materials, unsafe materials in menorahs, as well as Christmas trees, can cause fires. And in fact, from 2016 to 2018, there were about 100 Christmas tree fires and about 1,100 candle fires, resulting in 30 deaths and 180 injuries. There's a lot of work to do in educating the public. But in addition to education, enforcement is also important. Enforcement by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which needs more resources. It has been, unfortunately, underfunded. And it faces roadblocks in conducting recalls, leaving consumers in the dark about what products may be dangerous to their families. The CPSC is required to go through an extraordinarily burdensome rulemaking process that slows down many needed product standards, preventing action from being taken on well-established dangers. So we need to fortify the CPSC with additional resources sufficient to do enforcement, and also more adapted resources so they can do their job more effectively. They are the main watchdog and warning system for consumers so that these kinds of tragedies can be prevented. And that's the key word, prevented. These kinds of accidents, injuries, deaths can be prevented if we take action to stop the hidden problems in many of these toys, hidden in plain sight. Warnings will help caregivers and parents before they buy or after someone provides a gift to make sure that holidays are really a time of joy, not tragedy. With that, I will turn to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say welcome to our witnesses, and we also have two witnesses that are joining us remotely today. So we thank you all for being here, and we thank our staffs who have worked to bring this hearing together and to have this happen for us today. We've had some really insightful hearings this year on consumer products. Now, we've spent a lot of time looking at the online space, and we've had TikTok and Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and all of your platforms that unfortunately are adversely impacting children and families. And so it's appropriate that today we look at the physical space and how important it is that at this time of year we look at what is happening in that space of toys and the excitement that comes with holiday decor, and making certain that the supply chain is a safe one for products that are going to be put on the shelves. And we're hearing a lot about supply chains these days. So what is getting through? Let's make certain that it is safe. Now, as a mom and a grandmother, I am especially attuned to all of this. And the issue about the button batteries, which we've discussed, is one that I've looked at and have firsthand experience with. My little 15-month-old granddaughter has a dancing, light-up singing octopus that she absolutely loves, and she taps it on something and it, springs into action. And she ran the batteries out on it. So my husband had to change the batteries. So he opens the back and it's the button battery. I sent him to the garage, to the trash can, to empty the batteries and then to get the replacement batteries so that it would work. But that's the kind of thing that becomes a hazard, and you don't expect that to be a hazard, but we know that it does. So we thank you, Ms. Ham-Smith, for being here, for sharing your story, and for the awareness that you bring to the issue. And today we're also going to hear about the voluntary steps that retailers can and should be taking as they look at product safety. A big part of this is standards development. And many times people will say, well, why do you think it's so important that we keep standard setting in the U.S. and not let China get into the business of standard setting? And one of the reasons that this is so important is because when you look at the supply chain, you look at innovation, you look at the products that are getting in there, we have a certain set of guidelines that are vitally important to us in order to protect what eventually gets through that supply chain and makes it to the shelves in our stores, and thereby what people have access to and what they're taking into their homes. We're very concerned about what we see happening with some of the infiltration of counterfeit products, things that are infringed on copyrights and are sold online, and people end up with this in their home. A few years ago, when I was in the house, we had a Tennessee family who had purchased a hoverboard online. And this is when hoverboards were the big gift item that year, and they found one online, and of course it caught on fire and their house burned. So these are the things that we watch out for to make certain that the supply chain is going to be safe. And as more consumers are buying from third-party platforms, that they're going to have the insight into where these products are coming from and why these products might be unsafe. And this is an area that the chairman and I have discussed where Section 230 comes into play with needed reforms that would make certain that products that are on these third-party platforms are going to be as advertised. Now, we know that the CPSC, as the chairman said, has a role to play in all of this. They have a new chairman that has just taken the role over there, and we're looking forward to what they're going to bring forward as far as doing their due diligence. But to all of our witnesses today, the Toy Association, looking at the health of children, looking at these supply chains, it is important that everyone do their due diligence to make certain that products that are placed in the marketplace are safe. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for this. Thank you again to our witnesses, and look forward to today's hearing.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. And again, thanks for your cooperation. Our witnesses today are a really great panel. Trista Hamsmith is a parent advocate and founder of Reese's Purpose. Ms. Hamsmith's daughter, Reese, passed away at 18 months old from injuries that she suffered after ingesting a button battery in December 2020. Since then, Ms. Hamsmith has testified before the Consumer Product Safety Commission. She created a National Button Battery Awareness Day. She founded a nonprofit, Reese's Purpose, which advocates for legislation that would create national standards for consumer products with button batteries. Hannah Rhodes, Consumer Watchdog Associate, United States PIRG. Hannah is the author of a recent United States Public Interest Group report entitled, as it has been for 36 years, Trouble in Toyland. Before her work at US PIRG, she worked for Kids in Danger, also known as KID, as a product safety intern. She's a graduate BA, summa cum laude in political science and German from DePaul University. Joining us remotely, Ben Hoffman, who is chairman of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Council on Injury, Violence, Poison Prevention Executive Committee. Dr. Hoffman is a pediatrician and nationally recognized expert in child injury prevention and education. He currently serves as director of the Tom Sargent Safety Center at Dornbecker Children's Hospital and as director of the Oregon Center of Children and Youth with Special Needs. And we are joined remotely as well by Joan Lawrence, Senior Vice President for Standards and Regulatory Affairs of the Toy Industry Association. Ms. Lawrence manages the Toy Industry Association's product safety programs encompassing the development of safety standards and consumer and industry safety education. Ms. Lawrence chairs the ASTM Subcommittee on Toy Safety, which is responsible for the continuing development of Toy Safety Standard ASTM F963. So we'll hear first from Ms. Hamsmith, and then from Ms. Rhodes, Dr. Hoffman, and Ms. Lawrence separately. Ms. Hamsmith, the floor is yours.
Can we start the video, please?
And I understand you have a video. Okay. Apparently, we don't have the audio part of it. We'll make sure it's in the record, though.
Good morning. My name is Trista Hamsmith, and I'm here to share why enacting legislation to make consumer products that use button batteries safer is so important, and impress on you why time is of the essence, especially now as families prepare for another holiday gift-giving season. Button batteries are a hidden hazard every day, but the risk exponentially rises during the holiday season, given how many toys, decorative items, and gifts require the use of button batteries. Reese Elizabeth Hamsmith, known affectionately to those closest to her as Riri, was born into this world a spunky, sassy, full of life little girl on June 13th, 2019. At only 16 months old, Reese took the attention of an entire room. The moment she walked in with her spirited demeanor, inquisitive attitude, she lived life in a way that most will never know. She loved hard, she played hard, and she fought harder. One morning, we noticed that Reese was snotty, stuffy, and not her usual self, so we took her to the doctor. She was diagnosed with croup and given a steroid shot. We were sent on our way. The following day, we noticed a button battery missing in our home. We rushed to the hospital, and a quick x-ray confirmed that she had in fact swallowed that battery. Reese had emergency surgery to remove it and spent a few days in ICU. I remember being so scared when we were finally able to go home, as we were no longer allowed to give her solid foods. The plan was liquid foods only for 4 to 6 weeks, and then we would rescope. I took a deep breath and went to the store to stock up on every possible thing that might satisfy her. It was such a great few days back home with Reese. One of those days we went to Target where she saw this little dinosaur. She looked at it and bravely roared for all of Target to hear. It's probably one of my favorite and one of my last good memories of her. Reese was still very raspy, so that Friday I decided to err on the side of caution, and we went back to the doctor. They were worried that a hole might have been created. Once these batteries are removed from emergency surgery, they actually can continue to burn, and hers did. A hole was burned through her esophagus and through her trachea, creating a fistula, which acts as a tunnel connecting the two. We now had our liquid food going where it didn't need to be, and we had air going where it didn't need to be. The following morning, they took her back to surgery. She came back sedated and on a vent, and she also got a G-button so that we could administer nutrition straight to her tummy. This was the start of our last 40 days. Over those 40 days, Reese endured dozens of scopes, x-rays, multiple collapsed lungs, a 12-and-a-half-hour surgery, withdrawal from being addicted to the medications, and multiple codes. She was going to be put on a trach, which was going to put us on the road to recovery and the path back home, and we were just about a week away from that. I was almost numb at this point to the many procedures that they asked us to do. This morning they asked for a scope, a bedside scope. We'd done it plenty of times. They said it needed to be done, and so we did. This one was different, though. The entire team was bedside doing their thing, and the nightmare began. The beeping, the yelling, the flashing lights. No pulse, again and again. I paced, I pressed my hands on the glass, and I cried, yet I was in shock at the same time. This time she didn't come back. That's right, I watched my baby die more than once. I got to hold her that day, but it was a week too soon, and she was blue, and she was lifeless, and it seemed like the life had been taken out of me too. Unfortunately, I'm not the first, nor will I be the last parent to have to live this nightmare. Early on, when Reese was still fighting her battle, I knew I wanted to spread awareness. At the time, I imagined it would be with Reese by my side, but I guess my plan wasn't the plan. Her earthly battle may be over, but her true battle, her true plan, and her true purpose has just begun. Bed battery ingestion is a growing threat to children. There were 3,500 bed battery ingestions reported in 2020. However, it's estimated from the American Academy of Pediatrics that only 11% of cases are reported, meaning this is happening to over 30,000 annually in the U.S. alone. There was a 93% increase in ER-related bed battery ingestions in 2020. Once ingested, these batteries can cause severe tissue burns in as little as 2 hours, and as I said before, will continue to burn even after removed. 61.8% of ingestions come from the product. They're not coming from our trash can. They're not coming from our junk drawers. They are coming from products that are failing to securely close these batteries in. I'm asking for your support to mandate guidelines to make all consumer products safer. Bed batteries are the fastest growing and highest margin segment in the battery market, with double-digit industry growth projected for production of and products using bed batteries. These incidents will only continue to rise and pose a bigger threat for children. It's been estimated that a child swallows a bed battery every 3 hours. Think about that. In the time this committee meets today, at least one child, possibly more, will have swallowed an unsecured battery and face a lifetime of health issues or worse, end up dying. Children often obtain loose or unsecured batteries, and ingestions usually go unseen, making the critical window for survival absent by the time they are discovered. Last Christmas, our family gathered, but it wasn't to exchange gifts and sing carols. It was to celebrate Reese's life. With the holidays upon us again, who knows how many unsecure and unsafe items will be given as a gift with the best intentions and love, and to make it into unsuspecting families' homes. We never knew about the dangers of battery ingestion. I hear from families all over the country on a daily basis that they did not either. They share with me their story, their heartache, sometimes their near miss, and their long roads to recovery. It's a club that I never wanted to be in, and I wish I wasn't standing here alone because that would mean Reese would be by my side. Please don't let the death of my daughter Reese and her purpose be in vain. Children's safety is a nonpartisan issue. We all have children that we love and we want to protect, whether it's our own children or other children in our lives. Help me protect all children of the United States so that we never have to hear a story like Reese's again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hamsmith. We will not have questions for you. As I've mentioned to you when we spoke before your testimony, your story is so compelling, I don't think there's a need for questions. But in a certain sense, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, that photograph of Reese, I think, says it all. And this tiny battery, which, as you say, causes 30,000 injuries every year. We have no precise or accurate measurements because they don't need to be reported. There's no requirement that they be recorded or reported. And so you were also right that the cause of child safety ought to be bipartisan. And the best example of it is what Senator Blackburn and I are doing in Reese's memory, Reese's Law, which will require warnings, and it will require sufficient compartment fastening of this battery within this kind of device, wherever it is. And these devices are very common. They're found throughout homes and all kinds of common items, but they need to be screwed in. They need to be fastened so that they don't pop out. And that is also a standard that will be imposed by Reese's Law. So my hope is that we will find bipartisan support throughout the Senate and the Congress for this law, and we couldn't be more grateful to you for being here today. Thank you so much. We will go now to Ms. Rhodes, who is with us here.
Good morning, Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Blackburn, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Hannah Rhodes, and I'm a Consumer Watchdog Associate with the U.S. Public Interest Research Group. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this important hearing on hidden holiday hazards. U.S. PIRG is an independent, nonpartisan group that works for consumers in the public interest. For 36 years, we've released the Trouble in Toyland Report, looking at trends to determine the potential dangers facing our children each holiday season. Our annual report has led to 150 recalls of unsafe toys and other important regulatory action. For our report this year, our primary focuses were counterfeit, knockoff, and mislabeled toys. Toys have strict safety standards, including tests for toxic chemicals, small parts, and what happens when they're used and abused, as kids do. It is alarming that a child could get their hands on a toy that has not been tested for safety. In October, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials in Baltimore said they seized a shipment of toys from China that contained toxic chemicals. Lab tests conducted by the CPSC showed the coatings of toys exceeded safe levels of lead, cadmium, and barium. Toxic chemicals in toys are just one example of the dangers of counterfeit toys can pose to children. Toxic chemicals are especially dangerous because while an adult may be able to detect other quality issues, consumers can't see toxic chemicals. Potentially unsafe counterfeits are not unique to toys. Earlier this month, CBP officials at Los Angeles Long Beach Seaport said they identified and seized a record-breaking number of counterfeit and other prohibited merchandise during fiscal year 2021. The products were appraised at more than $760 million. Given how common this problem is this holiday season, consumers should be on the lookout for counterfeits when shopping for any product, especially if they're opting to shop online. When purchasing an artificial tree, it's important to identify that it has a label saying that it's fire-resistant. When purchasing decorative lights, consumers need to look for a label from an independent test laboratory to confirm they've been tested for safety. Our advice for consumers on how to identify counterfeit products online includes reading through the entire product description for mislabelings and misspellings, researching the seller, being wary of reviews, and being skeptical of very low prices. In offering consumers advice about how to protect themselves this holiday season, we also highlight the problems that we are confronted with as consumers. Unfortunately, the burden is on the consumers to identify counterfeit, knockoff, and mislabeled products, which can be difficult for those who are unfamiliar with lab testing certifications, age warning labels, and what the manufacturer's brand logo looks like. Small metal objects are among the most dangerous small parts. They can harm both children and adults. High-powered magnets, button cell, and coin cell batteries have different components but share the same risk. If someone swallows them, they can cause serious injury that requires invasive procedures to fix, and they can even kill the person who swallows them. In October, new data released showed that from 2010 to 2020, hospitals reported to the CPSC 1,072 cases of ingested magnets. Not every hospital reports to the CPSC, so those numbers may be much higher. For our annual report, we purchased from Amazon this GWAC magnet set that I brought with me today. Advertised as a magnet set with non-magnetic steel balls and a magnetic base, we found that the small steel balls in the set were magnetic. Whether that's an error in the manufacturer's distribution or what's listed on Amazon doesn't really matter. What matters is a child could swallow these magnets, especially if the parents don't believe that the balls in the set are magnetic. The National Capital Poison Center reported that children 5 years old or younger ingested 1,843 button cell batteries in 2019, with 1,502 of those cases requiring medical treatment. Another children's accessory I brought with me today also exemplifies the risks of coin cell batteries in consumer products. K&M International recalled 42 models of the Wild Republic slapwatches in May. This slapwatch was purchased through eBay last week, 6 months later. The Wild Republic slapwatches were recalled because the coin cell battery could fall out and be ingested by children. What the slapwatches also exemplify is another issue confronting consumers this holiday season. the ability to purchase recalled products online. Consumers are able to learn about recalled products on saferproducts.gov, but the burden is still on the consumer, who may not be aware that it is illegal for any resale seller to sell a product that they know or should know has been recalled. It is important that host sites monitor listings for dangerous products and remove them. For recalling companies, they should promote the recall to the same extent as they do promoting and marketing the product to begin with. U.S. PERG supports the INFORM Act to help prevent counterfeit and other dangerous items from ending up in Americans' homes. We support RISA's law and the CPS rules to require child-resistant closures on consumer products that use button cell and coin cell batteries. We support the CPSC using strong enforcement action to prevent high-powered magnets from continuing to be sold, and we encourage the CPSC to consider a more protective small parts test. As the leader in protecting children from dangerous toys since the mid-'80s, we're happy to work with the committee. We all want to keep our youngest Americans safe. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Rhodes. And now Dr. Ben Hoffman.
Good morning, Chair Blumenthal, Ranking Member Blackburn, Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Dr. Ben Hoffman, and I'm here today on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics, where I serve as chair of the Council on Injury, Violence, and Poison Prevention Executive Committee. I want to specifically thank Ms. Hamsmith for her very stirring testimony, extend my condolences for her loss, and just say that part of the greatest opportunity I've had in the last several years is to partner with families as a pediatrician and as an injury prevention advocate to work together on causes like this. As Senator Blumenthal mentioned, the holiday season is a very special time for kids and for families, with the thrill of new toys and festive decorations. I myself, as a father, have long treasured the joy of seeing my now grown children enjoying the holiday season. But as a pediatrician and expert on injury prevention, I know that our annual celebrations can place kids at risk, which necessitates thoughtful policy to prevent injuries from toys, decorations, and other hazards in the home. Pediatricians routinely counsel families on the best ways to stay safe over the holidays, and the AAP parenting website, healthychildren.org, has helpful tips for parents on how to buy safe toys, how to decorate for the holidays in a safe way, and I've included some key recommendations that pediatricians often give in my written testimony. We also know that the holidays can be a very busy and overwhelming time for parents, and our safety messages are not sufficient to protect children. Parents and caregivers often incorrectly assume that toys and products that they see on store shelves or websites have been tested and proven to be safe for their kids, but many hazardous products make it to market with no demonstration of safety for children. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission and Congress both have critical roles in protecting children from these risks. The AAP thanks Senators Blumenthal and Blackburn for your bipartisan leadership in co-sponsoring RISA's law. Button batteries are ubiquitous, as we've heard, found in common products, including remote controls, watches, cameras, toys. The batteries are tremendously dangerous as swallowed, as we heard, and contact with the child's airway or esophagus immediately causes the battery to discharge electricity, which results in burns, which are immediate and a life-threatening emergency. I have seen children who've suffered life-altering burns to their esophagus or food tube after ingesting a button battery that was undetected by parents for less than an hour. The AAP has strongly endorsed RISA's law and urges its expeditious enactment. Another ingestion hazard we expect to see over the holidays comes from these high-powered magnets that Ms. Rhodes mentioned. When two or more magnets are swallowed, the attractive force allows them to find each other across different segments of the digestive tract, which leads to intestinal injury, rupture, or even death. During a 3-week period in 2019, after the previous ban had been vacated, my institution had 3 kids admitted in a 3-week period, where surgeons removed a total of 36 tiny magnets from their intestines. I personally worked with a 5-year-old boy who swallowed 5 of these magnets and narrowly averted requiring a colostomy, as the magnets found each other across multiple loops of bowel and cut off the blood supply. The AAP has endorsed the Magnet Injury Prevention Act, and we also support the CPSC's efforts to address this hazard through a recent mandatory recall and through a new safety standard. In this season of giving, it's crucial for parents and policymakers to be aware of other products that can pose hazards for children. The AAP continues to urge Congress and the CPSC to protect children from inclined infant sleep products, crib bumpers, and other sleep products that can lead to suffocation and other infant sleep-related deaths. Holiday parties with children running around the house also highlight the risk of furniture tip-overs and the importance of passing the bipartisan STURDY Act, which we urge the full committee to mark up and advance. In closing, I want to note that a strong and fully functioning CPSC is critical to keep children safe over the holidays and throughout the year. Congress should ensure the agency has the funding, personnel, and statutory authorities necessary to proactively address risks to children before they lead to significant injuries and fatalities, and to effectively recall dangerous products. The AAP is grateful to the subcommittee for its focus on children's product safety during the holiday season, and we look forward to continuing to work with you so that families can safely celebrate the holidays and purchase with greater confidence products that are safe for their children. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Hoffman. And now Joan Lawrence.
I just want to make sure you can hear me.
We
Good
can
morning.
hear
My name is Joan Lawrence, and I am the Senior Vice President, Standards and Regulatory Affairs for the Toy Association. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on this important topic, Chairman Blumenthal and Ranking Member Blackburn. Product safety is the top priority for the toy industry, and in fact, my role at the Toy Association includes promoting toy safety and safe play year-round. Accordingly, I also serve as the chairperson of the multi-stakeholder expert subcommittee on toy safety under ASTM International, responsible for the ASTM F963 toy safety standard. The Toy Association is a not-for-profit trade association whose members include more than 950 businesses, all involved in bringing safe, fun toys and games to children. The Toy Association and its members have served as leaders in global toy safety efforts. In the 1970s, we helped create the world's first comprehensive toy safety standard. The ASTM F963 toy safety standard, as it is now known, has been recognized as a gold standard for toy safety, and its subcommittee of experts, including government, medical and child development experts, industry, engineers and inventors, toy safety testing labs, and consumer representatives, continually reviews the standard to keep pace with product innovation, incorporating the latest intelligence on product safety and children's behavior, and has led the world in this regard. In fact, in 2008, the US Congress passed the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, which among its other provisions made ASTM F963 a mandatory consumer product safety rule for all toys sold in the US, and it requires testing and certification of compliance to the standard. In effect, Congress also endorsed the work of the ASTM Expert Toy Safety Subcommittee and its process for continual review. In all, there are over 100 different safety standards and tests for toy safety required of all toys sold in this country, and these standards have been used as a model for other jurisdictions. Among the requirements are strict standards for the use of magnets and batteries in children's toys. For magnets, the use of certain powerful rare earth magnets that are small parts and could be swallowed is not allowed in children's toys. Despite this, there remain concerns and confusion over adult magnetic products still available in the marketplace that are small parts and do not comply with our toy standard. These products are not children's toys and are not safe for children. Batteries that are small parts also pose a unique threat to young children, particularly those under 3 years of age who may still mouth objects. Since the 1990s, the toy safety standard has addressed batteries used in children's toys, requiring a locking mechanism on the battery compartment to prevent children's access to the batteries. These requirements apply to all batteries in toys intended for children under 3 years of age, and batteries that are small parts, such as coin and button cells, in all toys. Following a report regarding battery ingestion from various consumer products, the ASTM Subcommittee on Toy Safety revisited the standard for batteries and found that it was providing effective protection, preventing children from accessing batteries in a toy. However, consumers were largely unaware of the hazard that small batteries could pose if ingested. While there was not evidence that toy battery compartment locks were failing, there were cases of children ingesting batteries that may have been purchased for use in the toy and left where a child could access them, and that even some used or spent batteries can still pose a risk. Accordingly, in 2016, requirements were added to the toy standard so that toys that use coin cell batteries include labeling to alert consumers to the danger and the importance of keeping batteries away from young children. Additionally, since many non-toy products common in our homes and in a child's environment do not have the same safeguards, the Toy Association began recommending that the example of the toy standard for batteries be adopted by other product categories as well, to reduce the hazard that these products may pose. We have also incorporated messaging as part of our year-round consumer awareness campaign on the importance of keeping children away from batteries from any product, and are closely following the development of several protective technologies for the batteries themselves that may offer enhanced protection of children in the future. As you can see, the safety of toys is a high priority, and toys are highly regulated in this country. However, I would be remiss in not mentioning the concern about counterfeit toys being sold in online marketplaces. The Toy Association has continued to raise the concern over the increase in counterfeit toys. While all toys are required to comply with safety standards, counterfeits, while also skirting intellectual property law, may not comply with the range of standards to which toys are subject, putting unsuspecting consumers, children, and families at risk. Any business selling toys in the US must be held to the same high safety standards. Accordingly, the Toy Association supports both the Informed Consumers Act and the Shop Safe Act to require more transparency and create new accountability to help reduce the presence of counterfeits and unsafe products sold online. As an industry, we recognize the trust that families place in us and in the safety of toys. We take that responsibility very seriously and pride ourselves on the effectiveness of the toy standard, and in its process for revision, it seeks to continually keep pace with innovation and new information. ASTM F963 serves as a model for other countries looking to protect the health and safety of their youngest citizens, and for other product categories looking to emulate its protective standards for children. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to addressing any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lawrence. We were very appreciative that we've been joined by the chairman of the committee, Senator Cantwell. I'm going to turn to her for any statements or questions that she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly want to thank you, Senator Blumenthal, and Senator Blackburn for your leadership on this issue and having a hearing at this important time. As we enter the holiday season, consumers are purchasing these gifts and presents at record numbers, and we need to make sure that our safety is at the utmost level of scrutiny. I'm deeply concerned about how well our current system protects consumers, particularly children, from unsafe products, and we need to do better, as the hearing already has pointed out from our witnesses. Recalls are important, but they are not always adequate. Too often, product recalls are not effective at getting dangerous products out of circulation. 4.5 years ago, the CPSC held a recall effectiveness workshop which highlighted the low effectiveness of recalls. This was then corroborated by a GAO report that issued a statement about faulty CPSC for not consistently assigning more recall checks to these high-risk recalls. So today I am sending a letter to the CPSC asking for them to improve their recall efficiency and making sure that they take steps to improve the process, asking for relevant information to show that we need to do a better job at this. The importance of this work is underscored by the CPSC's current own estimates about emergency rooms treated 198,000 toy-related injuries in 2020. So in 2021, 13 toy products have been recalled by the CPSC so far due to high lead levels, risks of children's choking and on small parts, and other avoidable risks. So I wanted to ask you, Dr. Hoffman, what policy recommendations would you recommend to improve the CPSC's ability to ensure corrective actions? Ms. Rhodes, would you support requiring retailers or manufacturers of recalled goods to use information collected through the course of sale to directly notify consumers and buyers of these known hazards?
Yes, we do support recalling companies using information that was gathered during the transaction to notify customers of a recall.
And how well do you think we're doing on that?
I think certain companies have actually enacted that. A good example is Amazon sometimes will reach out to customers because they have the means to do so. But typically with recall effectiveness, we have low rates, as you suggested, and there's a lack of accountability in the recall effectiveness with recalling companies.
Dr. Hoffman, how effective are we if we're not getting the message out?
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. I think if we don't get the message out, we can't be effective. And I think that we need to think about the recalls from the standpoint of the families and consumers and do everything we can to make it as friendly for them as possible. I think an example where we have had some success is in child passenger safety around car seats. There is, with every car seat that is sold, an opportunity to register it with the manufacturer, register the owner with the manufacturer so that they can proactively reach out. I think that has some benefit, although there still are a lot of barriers to getting those completed. I think this also goes back to the need to have a fully staffed and fully functioning Consumer Product Safety Commission that can work to meet the needs of families and consumers.
So getting Ms. Boyle appointed so that we can have an active and aggressive commission. I'm reminded, I think this committee dealt with this issue once before as it related to used cars and the process of notifying people on how to notify individuals when these cars were defaulted and effective, and I think the committee did good work. So I'm asking the ranking member and the subcommittee chair here to maybe you could look at that as a model, and let's see what information we get back from the CSPC. But let's take action on this. You guys are providing great leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Chairman Cantwell. Excellent point, and we will follow up on it, and very much appreciate your leadership on this issue as you were involved in the used car recall issue as well. Thank you so much. And I want to just take the point that Senator Cantwell made so well. I have introduced S 1355, which is the Sunshine and Product Safety Act, that strikes a section of the current law, Section 6B, the section that restricts the disclosure of information. It actually restricts the disclosure of information by the CPSC related to product hazards. It permits a manufacturer to challenge the disclosure of information in federal court if the manufacturer believes the disclosure is not, quote, fair in the circumstances, which is an extraordinarily vague standard. Changes to 6B would improve recall efficiency and give the CPSC more of the teeth that it needs to be a real tiger, not a paper watchdog. Ms. Rhodes, can you comment on that potential change in the Sunshine in Product Safety Act?
Absolutely. We see with recalls that once the recall is disclosed, consumers can learn about it, but there's this whole hidden process with recalling companies and CPSC where they can be discussing an unsafe product for weeks or even months before consumers are even informed. The removal of 6B will allow consumers to get information immediately, which is especially important when we're talking about products that can seriously injure and also kill people.
Dr. Hoffman, would you favor that kind of change in the law that would permit greater disclosure and more promptly about hazards in toys?
Absolutely. And I think for many juvenile products, that's an issue. We saw that very specifically in the issue of incline sleepers, when on April 5th of 2019, it was disclosed by the Consumer Product Safety Commission that there were 10 deaths associated with those products. And a report by Consumer Reports that came out 3 days later revealed there actually were 32. The fact that products can be identified as hazardous without and they're with a lack of any requirement to notify the public around the specific product, I think leads to significant increased risk of injury and death for kids.
Thank you. Ms. Lawrence? Ms. Lawrence, will you support that change in Section 6B of the Act?
Well, prefacing my response by the fact that I am not a lawyer, I do understand that 6B is in place in part because early information in the investigation and decisions regarding a recall is often inaccurate. And thus, if information was released prematurely, it could be misleading to consumers and unfair to the company. But I'm happy to provide a response from the Toy Association on this issue, should you be interested in that following the hearing.
I'm not only interested, but I would request that you provide that response. I hope that the Toy Industry Association will support it because it would simply remove time-consuming and costly roadblocks to disclosure of information to consumers. It permits, in effect, manufacturers to block and conceal very severe hazards in toys for lengthy periods of time. And I'm hopeful that the Toy Industry Association will support the Sunshine in Product Safety Act that would remove this kind of impediment. So I will welcome and ask you to provide that information. In this first round of questioning, let me turn to you, Ms. Rose, because you brought with you the Wild Republic slap wrist toy, or it's actually an accessory. It's a watch, as I understand it. And you held it up briefly. Could you hold it up again, please?
Yes, absolutely.
I know it's still in the package, but I gather that that watch has a lithium battery that can pop out. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is tucked behind here, if you could see the back of the watch.
And a child who has that watch could easily pop out the battery.
Yes, that's why it was recalled.
The battery would look something like this. And the battery, in effect, has an acid that eats through the lining of the trachea or esophagus in a child who swallows it. It's, I guess, the acid that does the damage, but this kind of small button cell battery is found in a wide variety of items. Could you list a few of them that are commonly found in households?
Yes, they can be found in TV remotes, garage doors. Sometimes that clicker will have button cell, coin cell batteries. We do find them in children's toys, of course. So objects that are just around the house that you may not think of, especially when it comes to TV remotes that may just be placed on the table.
They're powerful batteries. They're useful. They perform an important function. But if they're unsafely secured in those common household items, they can be swallowed by children, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Hoffman, could you tell us what happens to the esophagus of a child who swallows one of these batteries if it's lodged in the throat?
Absolutely. So those batteries function, there's a positive side and a negative side. So the top is one and the bottom is the other. If there is contact between the two, and there's contact on the positive side and the negative side at the same time, it starts to discharge electricity. The acid is in the battery, and that's what leads to the electric charge. In the esophagus, which is the food tube of a child, the top part of the battery and the bottom part of the battery will be contacted by the tissue. And that contact with the tissue will allow electricity to begin flowing. And so it's not actually a chemical burn, but it's an electrical burn that happens. And it happens immediately at the first contact between the child's tissue and the top and bottom of the battery. So the damage is instantaneous, and the degree of damage is a function then of the strength of the battery and the duration of time that it is in contact with human tissue. So we can see injury within an hour or less, and as Ms. Hamsmith's experience tragically showed, within a couple of hours, that damage can be irreversible and potentially fatal.
Dr. Hoffman, does the damage continue potentially after the battery is removed?
In the same way that any burn continues to cause tissue damage after the source of the burn, the heat source, is removed, yes. And especially with electrical burns, that's true.
Is the burn treatable? It would seem like the throat is a difficult part of the body to reach if there is a burn in the esophagus.
Absolutely. While the gastrointestinal tract, the digestive tract has a significant blood supply, it does tend to heal fairly well. But these burns are severe enough that they can cause lifelong damage, and if they're deep enough and cause, as tragically happened in Reese's case, perforation or rupture, it can lead to even longer term issues, as the experience with the Hamsmiths shows.
There's no requirement now, Dr. Hoffman, as I understand it, that hospitals specifically report these kinds of injuries, correct?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
So the number that we have, which itself is absolutely appalling and horrifying, could well be only a fraction of the total number. In fact, it's been estimated that it's only 11%, that 350,000 number.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And let me ask you, I know that this is more an educated guess on your part than actual documented scientific data, but what could explain the uptick in ingestions in 2020, an increase of 93% between March and September of that year?
Yeah, I think, Senator, you alluded to this in your opening remarks. I think a lot of it has to do with just exposure. You know, a child who lives in an environment where there are no button or coin batteries is going to have a 0% chance of accessing one and potentially ingesting it. You know, the period of time we're talking about, we were still looking at kids who were home during the day. Parents were out of their broken away from their routine, and caught and forced to be teachers and workers and babysitters. And while we know that parental supervision and the supervision of caregivers is absolutely essential to help prevent injuries for children, it's completely insufficient. And having kids around products with button and coin batteries for longer periods of time with that potentially distracted supervision, I think, goes a long way towards explaining this tragic increase.
Right. And some battery manufacturers actually have developed a coating with a very bitter taste, a bitter coating for the batteries to help signal to kids or others that they should spit it out. Should we still push for some kind of mandatory product safety standard that will secure the batteries within whatever the items are?
Absolutely, Senator. I think so much of what we try to do in injury prevention is install layers of protection. I think the bittering agent, there's no data yet to support that. I think there's some promise in it, but we don't have any hard data to show that it is at all effective. And I think, short of eliminating these from an environment, doing everything we can to put barriers to access in place, which would include making it as hard as possible for a battery to be removed inadvertently from a product by a child who's not supposed to have access to it, would be a huge step forward.
And I know that the American Academy of Pediatrics has done a lot to educate parents. Would you say that parents are generally unaware or aware of the dangers of these batteries?
I think it's tremendously variable. Clearly Academy policy and everything we have that is designed for families, including our healthychildren.org resources, talk about this, but there's so much, there's so many hazards around, and these batteries are so ubiquitous. I think it is a little bit challenging to get people's attention, and certainly to get people's attention to the degree that I think the problem warrants.
Thank you. I have a number of additional questions, but I am going to turn to the ranking members and then come back whenever she finishes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Rhodes, I want to come to you first. You mentioned in your testimony CBP apprehending the shipment in Baltimore that had the toxic chemicals, and I think it was barium, cadmium, lead. So how can we help ensure that these counterfeit items never get into the supply chain, that they are stopped before they come in? And then likewise, CPSC had recently removed some of their inspectors from the ports. Talk about those two things very quickly, please.
I will say that the ports are a little bit outside of my general expertise.
Yeah.
But when it comes to...
But the effect is not.
Yeah, the effect is not.
Yeah.
When it comes to these products, a lot of them do come into the ports, but a lot of them are sold online. And one of the ways we can stop that is by having hosting platforms give customers as much information as they can about who is selling the product, as well as making sure that they are monitoring for dangerous listings so American consumers are not purchasing counterfeit products online and then having them shipped into the United States.
Right, and that would get into the Section 230 reforms that I mentioned earlier that would allow for that transparency and information share. Ms. Lawrence, let's go back to what you all at the Toy Association can do and how you are sharing information with customers. And Chairman Cantwell mentioned what we had passed when I was over in the House that dealt with information to purchasers of used cars and maybe using that as a model. But talk a little bit about what you all are proactively doing to share information with consumers about the dangers of certain toys. And I know at one point you all had done work on resale of toys, things that would show up in flea markets and different sales that people would have.
Yes, thank you for the question. We have great concerns about counterfeit products in particular because we know that these products are skirting copyright law and likely not complying with our tough toy safety standards as well. So we have, a couple of years ago, issued a white paper on this issue, on the issue of counterfeit toys and their increased occurrence in the marketplace and what could be done. We revised that white paper again in 2020 and found that with the increase in online sales, the issue continues to increase. We are, every day you see numerous products being sold on online marketplaces that would violate our tough toy safety standards. So we are working to communicate with the industry, with policymakers, and with consumers. For consumers, we provide information on how to shop the online marketplaces more safely, what to look for, what red flags to avoid when you're buying toys in an online forum. And more generally, we work year-round to educate consumers on how they can choose age-appropriate toys and toys that are appropriate for their families, their home environment, and also how to supervise play. We have a website, playsafe.org, that provides this year-round messaging for consumers so that they can understand, what goes into toy safety.
Ms. Lawrence, let me interrupt you right there. And you can do this for the record. I would like to know what organizations you all are partnering with to get this information out. Do you partner with like AARP or some of these organizations to educate grandparents who may think buying online is the way to do it? And it populates the screen and you've got 4 different options which look like the same toy. And 3 of them are counterfeit, but they're at the lower cost. So why don't you give me a list of the organizations that you're partnering with, and likewise, PlaySafe. How many unique users do you have to that website every year? This will help us to understand how broadly the information is getting into the community. I also, Ms. Rhodes, I'm going to come back to you first on this. CBP apprehended nearly 3/4 of $1 billion worth of goods at Long Beach alone coming in through the port of counterfeit goods. And that doesn't even touch what is there online. So we know what is coming in through the ports. But do you all have any way of quantifying counterfeit product that is coming into the marketplace online?
No, we have no
You
way
don't.
of quantifying.
Okay, Ms. Lawrence, do you all have any numbers that would quantify what is coming in illicitly?
We would rely on the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, who, as you mentioned, has inspectors at the ports as well as CBP to get an estimate of the number of products that
Okay,
are
but you
arriving
have-
in our U.S.
All right, but you have nothing that quantifies what is being done online.
It's very difficult to quantify what's being done online because while one day a product may be found to be violative, the next day that same seller could remake itself under a new name and sell that same product again.
Right, and
And
we
go
have seen
detect-
that many times. I've got innovators in Tennessee who hold a patent, and they're manufacturing in China, and one day in either an email or in their mailbox, they get a flyer for the product that they have had the company making for them at a lesser price. They've been ripped off. I want to, Ms. Lawrence, I'm going to stay with you for a second on standards and talk about the importance of these protocols around setting standards for the marketplace, and what you all do in that regard to set these standards.
Well, our experts, Toy Safety Committee, which is the ASTM Toy Safety Committee, continually is looking at when there's new innovation in products. They look at data, they look at incidents, information regarding incidents. They look at how children's behavior is changing over time. And all of these pieces of information and resources come together to drive and identify where emerging hazards may exist, where standards may need revision or new standards created. I'd also mention that listening to Reese and Trista's story today, from a personal note, that is the kind of story that keeps someone in the standards setting world up at night. And it is the very kind of story that motivates us our every day. It is those kinds of stories that drive us to continually look at those standards and revise them as needed to address issues in the marketplace.
Well, and we thank you all for your testimony and for the good work that you are doing. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Thanks very, very much, Senator Blackburn. I'm going to turn to Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you and the ranking member for today's important hearing and for all of the witnesses to be here, especially the powerful testimony, Ms. Hamsmith. Story needs to be heard more and more. And I know that other outlets have done their due diligence to make sure parents and families are aware. But just thank you for continuing to be an advocate and the courage and the strength to be with us today. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, as the holidays are upon us, and we're always reminded that it's supposed to be a time to come together and to celebrate family and community, this hearing is really important because, as we heard with the powerful testimony today, oftentimes these toys are given with the best of intentions and without maybe even the proper warning of what should be on there, which is what the advocacy is. And that's only made worse with counterfeit products. Because if you have products that we know that are being manufactured under the guidelines in the regulatory environment, and they're still missing the mark, what happens when a product is counterfeit? In addition to that, we also know that there's price gouging taking place. And I was proud to join Senator Blumenthal, our chairman, in introducing a piece of legislation called Stopping the Grinch Bots Act, which is contributing to that. And when there are fewer, in this case, gaming devices that are out on the market, then there are more counterfeits that enter and then more dangers that result from that. Parents deserve fair pricing and safe products, not just for this time of year, but for all parts of the year. Ms. Rhodes, you outlined in your testimony the availability of counterfeit goods online is a problem year-round. So in my home state, one of the other areas that we have concerns with counterfeit products are Native American art, crafts, which have cost local artists millions and millions of dollars. Most of the imitations are created overseas, imported, and then sold here in the United States as genuine. It's a violation of federal law and needs to stop. And it's just every time I get a chance to talk about it, I remind everyone that you're going to go to jail if you're doing this once you're caught, and you will get caught. What's more, counterfeit safety gear can also cost people's lives. Last year in the Energy and Commerce Committee hearing, when I was a member of the House, there was a counterfeit bike that was brought in, a counterfeit bicycle helmet that was brought in. And they asked if I would stand on that bicycle helmet. I told them, well, I might crush it under normal circumstances, but they assured me by standing on one that I would wear regularly when I'm out riding my bike, that it would not crush the way that this one did. I stood on it, gave it a little bit of pressure, like an eggshell. And earlier that year, myself, I had a pretty serious fall where I went over the handlebars. My helmet stopped me from doing additional damage because I went into a bunch of rocks. So these counterfeit goods, in addition to the lack of safety standards, could very well cost people their lives. So the question that I have for the panel is, yes or no, do counterfeit products online pose a threat to the health and safety of consumers? Ms. Rhodes?
Yes.
Dr. Hoffman?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Lawrence?
Yes, they do.
And Ms. Rhodes, what steps should online platforms take to eliminate the presence of counterfeit goods?
Online platforms should inform the consumers as much information as they can about who they are purchasing good from. They can also, they can also use their platform to navigate what are dangerous listings and make sure they're removing them immediately.
So according to PIRG's annual Toy Safety Report for 2021, your organization also found multiple examples of recalled products available for sale online. So what more should these platforms do to ensure that dangerous recalled products aren't available on their sites?
For hosting sites, they should make sure that they are reviewing for recalling products. But for recalling companies, there needs to be more accountability in the system. One way could be the CPSC releasing an annual report looking at recall participation rates. We can also have recalling companies promote the recall the same extent that they would promote the product to begin with.
So recently, the CPSC also took action to recall more than 10 million magnets that also pose serious death concerns if people were to swallow those rare earth magnets as well. This year, less than a third of recalled products are actually corrected or destroyed. So there's still an uphill battle, even with the current standard of the CPSC. So my question is, how do we improve those numbers, and how can Congress and CPSC improve the effectiveness of product recalls?
Absolutely, and that goes to the recalling companies promoting and marketing, which they could do through a bunch of means. This could be through targeted social media ads, just actually promoting the recall on their social media pages. They can even use the influencers that they pay to promote the product to also talk about the product recall. The most important thing is getting awareness into the public. And while consumers can learn about recalls and even report bad incidents on saferproducts.gov, most consumers are not aware that that database exists. So it's important to also market saferproduct.gov and have the CPSC really highlight how important that database is and how it can be used by consumers.
I appreciate that. Well, Mr. Chairman, I do have a few other questions. I'll submit them to the record. But again, I want to thank the witnesses. And Ms. Sam-Smith, I'm sorry that you have to be here today, but I am grateful that you are. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Lujan. Senator Markey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. This is just such an incredibly important hearing. When parents put a Christmas gift under the Christmas tree, they assume it's safe. They assume nothing can go wrong. They think that they're making their child happy. They want their children to look up at them with big smiles as they're unwrapping all of these presents under the Christmas tree. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission's job is to make sure that the smile stays on the faces of those children and parents. And we know that historically, because of unscrupulous manufacturers of goods, that counterfeit products, that mislabeled items, that recalled products, just to name a few of the categories that exist, make their way under Christmas trees all across our country. And children are the victims. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission is supposed to be the cop on the beat to make sure that those children are not harmed in our country. So the examples are just so many that it's hard to focus on all of them, but children are especially vulnerable to toxic substances. And a minor flaw that would only be an inconvenience to an adult could have serious short and long-term consequences for a child. We know that. So from my perspective, this is a very important hearing, and what I would ask from you, Ms. Rhodes, is do we need a fifth Consumer Product Safety Commission commissioner so that they can act and put the right kinds of safeguards in place?
Yes, we absolutely do.
And do you agree with that, Ms. Hamsmith? Yeah, and Dr. Rhodes, do you agree with that? I'm sorry, Dr. Hoffman, I'm sorry, Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Senator Markey. Absolutely. The American Academy of Pediatrics believes that a fully functioning and adequately resourced Consumer Product Safety Commission is absolutely essential.
Yeah, thank you. And Ms. Rhodes, is there a particular group of products that are of most concern to you?
For counterfeit products?
Yeah.
Yes, I think children's toys falls in that category because we know children throw toys at the wall. They put them in their mouths. So if there are toxic chemicals or they can be causing small parts, those are known hazards. Other goods that are particularly concerning are medicine or cosmetics, things that are going on our body or we swallow them.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, this is a very important area. And here's what I will say. All I want for Christmas is a fifth Consumer Product Safety Commissioner to be put in place. And then families across the country can rely upon the federal government to ensure that these bad companies, these bad actors, don't endanger their children. So let's just work very hard here in the Commerce Committee and in the United States Senate to get that commissioner on the job to make sure that all of the children in our country are protected proactively, that the Commission is working hard to make sure these toys, these products are never on the shelves in the first place. So I thank all of you for being willing to testify today, and hopefully it will be the spur for us to telescope the time frame which it takes for us to get that fifth commissioner, to get Mary Boyle on the floor of the Senate for full consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Markey. I was going to make the same point about the fifth Consumer Protection CPSC commissioner. Well made, much better than I could. Let me ask our other witness, Ms. Lawrence, on behalf of the Toy Industry Association, assuming that you support toy safety, isn't it important that we have a fifth commissioner confirmed?
Absolutely. The CPSC is a small agency with a big mission, and we would support all resources to help them see through that mission for all consumer products, including the addition of the commissioner.
I really welcome and appreciate your support for additional resources. I assume, Ms. Rhodes, you agree that additional resources are important for the CPSC.
Yes, they're needed for the CPSC to do their job and protect consumers.
And Dr. Hoffman, Would you agree?
I absolutely agree.
You know, for this agency to be more than, as I mentioned earlier, a paper tiger, it has to have resources to investigate, to take evidence, to build the case. And in addition to eliminating Section 6B and the impediments it poses to effective education and disclosure, the resources are necessary to uncover the hazards in the first place. Would you agree, Ms. Rhodes?
Yes, they are needed.
You know, Ms. Hamsmith, I think, mentioned in her written testimony that Australia is one nation that has implemented a mandatory product standard to require warning labels and child-resistant closures on battery-operated devices, including toys. These requirements are set to go into effect, I believe, in 2022. What do you believe, Ms. Rhodes, that kind of requirement would have on toy safety in this country? In effect, it's Reese's Law.
Yeah. I believe it's critical that Reese's Law is passed. When speaking to a pediatrician from University Hospital, Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, we learned that button battery ingestions can start to burn holes within the first 30 minutes. It's critical that we have these safeguards to protect children's health.
Dr. Hoffman, you've mentioned that you support Reese's Law. Ms. Lawrence, would you agree that we should approve Reese's Law?
Yes, in fact, the Toy Association applauds the work you are doing to help keep children's, pardon me, to help keep children safe from battery ingestion. And we recommend that you use the example that has been set in our U.S. toy safety standard as a model for what you are seeking to do for other product categories.
And as you mentioned in your testimony, Ms. Lawrence, toys or objects with a play value are required to adhere to ASTM F963, which has a set of toy safety standards. Would you comment on what effect those standards have had on the toy industry?
Are you asking regarding batteries or in general?
Both, in general and specifically with respect to toy batteries.
Okay. Well, those standards are required by law, and companies must demonstrate compliance with third-party independent testing by an accredited laboratory and be certified that they comply with the standards. We have noticed since this has been made mandatory in the CPSIA Act of 2008, that we have seen a decrease in the number of recalls. We've also seen a significant decrease in the number of incidents related to toys. So we do see that making these requirements mandatory for all products sold in the US has had an impact. Regarding batteries, that standard was implemented as part of the toy standard in the 1990s. And when battery ingestion data came out about 10 years ago, we started to go through that data and look at what are the scenarios and examples where toys were involved somehow. And we found it was from situations where batteries were left within a child's reach, whether it was a spent battery or a new battery intended to go in a toy. That's how children were getting the batteries. But the locking mechanism that we have required in our toy standard was upheld because we found that it was working. Children were not, that locking mechanism was not failing and allowing children to get the batteries that way. But what it did tell us was that we needed to put labeling on toys so that consumers really understood how serious a hazard this is for children to access batteries from any source. And so in 2016, we implemented that addition to the toy standard. And we have found that this has made an impact. In general, most of the incidents are not related to toys. And when they are, it is because the batteries have been left within a child's reach or a child found them in the garbage can.
So I really hope that the Toy Association will back Reese's Law, and that when you get back to us with that position that it will be to support Reese's Law, because it would, in effect, extend or incorporate warnings and the compartments or securing, locking, whatever you call it, of the batteries within a device so that they would not pop out or be easily accessible to children. Dr. Hoffman, let me go back to something that is sort of a pet peeve of mine. I highlight it every year, balloons. I'm holding up a couple of examples. If we were not in the United States Senate, I would do what I normally do in the press conferences we have with Conperg in Connecticut, which is to blow up one of these balloons and then pop it and show how the remnants of that deflated balloon are so easily swallowed. Can you comment on how important a choking hazard balloons can be if they're not properly supervised?
Absolutely, Senator. I remember very vividly when I was in training in residency, caring for an 18-month-old child who at a birthday party had been holding a balloon, and an adult came up behind the child and tickled them to startle them, which caused the balloon to pop. The child inhaled and the balloon lodged itself in the child's airway. And he sadly died as a result of that. And that has forever impacted me. The issue of rubber and latex balloons, especially, it has been estimated that it's around 15 children a year die as a result of aspiration or ingestion of either balloons or parts of balloons. This is another thing that's completely preventable, and I appreciate that people like balloons. They're fun, but they're also they need to be considered a hazard. We don't see the same risk associated with the Mylar balloons, which I think are a reasonable alternative for somebody who absolutely positively had to have a balloon. But I think in 2021, it's hard to come up with an argument why we still need latex or rubber balloons, especially around kids. I think one of the things that needs to be highlighted, we spent a lot of time talking about toys. Kids don't care whether something is labeled a toy or not labeled a toy. If you give a child your car keys and that fob has button batteries in it, that child is going to explore it and play with it in a way they would play with anything else, including, especially for younger kids, putting it in their mouth. And so I think we need to be looking at this from the perspective of kids, recognizing that everything is a toy, and developmentally they're built to explore. And a lot of that exploration involves putting things in their mouth, especially for younger kids. And the safest thing we can possibly do is ensure that kids don't have access to those products.
I think that is a really excellent explanation. Not only do kids not know whether something is a toy or not, they don't really care or know whether a balloon is made of one substance or another, Mylar versus any other substance. And so Mylar balloons are a pretty good choice. Would you agree?
I think they're a much safer choice. They're not without hazard, but they're a much safer choice.
But parental supervision is important because asphyxiation can be caused in a matter of minutes, correct?
Yes, and I think parental supervision, I mentioned earlier this idea about layers of protection. Parental supervision is an absolutely essential layer, but it is completely insufficient because nobody's supervision can be perfect. And I mentioned earlier, I've had the privilege of working with a number of families who've lost children to unintentional injury and helping elevate their stories and bring their voices to the advocacy work. And one parent, I don't know if Senator Blackburn is still there, but a parent who's become a very close friend from Tennessee, always talks about everybody expects they're going to find the loophole, that it's never going to happen to them. But the fact of the matter is it does happen to people. It happens to real people who love their kids, who care, who are doing the best they possibly can. And all it takes is a second of distraction. And nobody can provide the perfect level of supervision. So we need those multiple layers, and that includes, things like closures on battery, closures to ensure that batteries can't be released, and removing potential hazards from the home, and making sure that things don't get to market that are fundamentally dangerous. I think that the magnets that you mentioned earlier are a really good example of something that, you know, to a child, doesn't matter whether it's called a toy or marketed as a toy. To a child, you know, rare earth magnets are a toy, and they end up in the mouth, and then they end up in the gut, and then that ends badly.
And I'm holding up some examples of those magnets, Dr. Hoffman. Rare earth magnets, they're very, very powerful. They're used on people's desks. They're kind of playthings for adults while they're on the phone. They can fiddle with them. But as you say, a child who walks into a parent's home office doesn't know that they're for the parent to fiddle with or play with, not for the child. And they are really difficult to separate, but they are composed of a lot of these tiny beads. Could you tell us, I tried a little bit earlier, what happens exactly to, or can happen to a child's digestive system if they swallow some of these magnets?
So thank you, Senator. If the child ingesting one would not be a problem. Ingesting more than one, those magnets are so strong that they're going to find each other across the bowel. And if they are inches apart, they will be drawn to each other. And what happens is they squeeze the bowel tissue, the gastrointestinal tissue between them, and that causes a loss of blood supply, and the bowel dies. And so injury there can happen also, you know, within a matter of a very short period of time, and as short a time as an hour. It can lead to perforation of the intestines, which is a very serious, life-threatening condition. And as happens with button and coin cell ingestions, they often they can be hard to detect, and they can often go undetected until they've caused serious injury.
Thank you. A number of pieces of legislation have been mentioned. The Sturdy Act, which is led by Senator Casey, that requires the CPSC to revise safety standards for freestanding clothing storage units such as dressers, bureaus, or chests of drawers. And a second version of the Sturdy Act was just reintroduced with consensus agreement among a number of the manufacturers. There are other pieces of legislation that have been introduced, and hope that we can move them forward. Ms. Rhodes, do you support this legislation?
The Sturdy Act? U.S. Park does not have a position on the Sturdy Act.
And Ms. Lawrence, I think you mentioned that you do. I don't know whether, Dr. Hoffman, you are familiar with the Sturdy Act.
Absolutely, and the American Academy of Pediatrics supports it very strongly.
I want to just close by, again, thanking all of our panelists, our witnesses this morning. You have provided a really powerful record for passing Reese's Law. I know that Ms. Lawrence will be providing us her position on behalf of the Toy Industry Association, but again, to Trista Hamsmith, you have really made this cause a national issue, and I'm very proud to be introducing Reese's Law today with Senator Blackburn. We hope it will be approved promptly. The sooner it's passed, the more children we can protect and the more injuries we can prevent. So I want to thank all of our witnesses and my colleagues. The record will remain open for 2 weeks in case there are any written questions from my colleagues or additional answers in response to questions from our witnesses. And with that, the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.